The Weight of Snow, a story of survival and memory. Part 1. Loss. The wind came from the north that morning, carrying the scent of early snow. Anika stood at the edge of the camp, watching the horizon where the grass met the sky in a thin grey line. Her daughter Winona slept inside the teepee behind her, wrapped in the buffalo robe that had once belonged to her father. The child did not remember him anymore. 3 winters had passed since the fever took him, along with Anika's mother, her uncle's family, and half the people in their band. The camp was smaller now, 15 lodges where once there had been 40. The spaces between them felt like missing teeth in an old mouth. Anika pulled her buffalo robe tighter against the cold. Her fingers found the worn edge where she had mended it last winter, the sinew stitching rough beneath her thumb. The hide was getting thin. It would not last another season. But there were no buffalo this far east anymore. The herds had moved, or the hunters from the settlements had killed them, or both. She did not know which. Behind her, someone coughed. The sound was wet and deep, coming from the lodge where old Ihawi lay dying. Another fever, different from the one 3 years ago, but just as hungry. 2 children had died already this month. The mothers had buried them in the hills, wrapped in whatever hides they could spare, singing the old songs in voices that cracked like dry wood. Anika did not go to the funerals anymore. She had buried enough. The sky lightened slowly, the color of ash. Frost covered the grass, each blade outlined in white, beautiful and cold. Anika's breath hung in the air before her face, and she thought of smoke, of fires dying, of words spoken and lost. Mother. Winona stood in the teepee entrance, the buffalo robe dragging behind her small body. Her black hair was tangled from sleep, her face still soft with it. "Come back inside," the child said. "It's cold." Soon. But Anika did not move. She watched the horizon, waiting for something she could not name. Waiting had become a kind of prayer. Winona came to stand beside her, saying nothing. The child had learned early not to ask too many questions. She was 6 winters old and already understood silence better than most adults. She leaned against Anika's leg, and together they watched the day arrive, thin and pale and offering nothing. The council met that afternoon in Tashunka's lodge. 11 men and 3 women sat in a circle around the fire pit, their faces shadowed and grim. Anika sat near the back, beside her cousin Makawi, who held her infant son against her chest. The baby was silent, watching the flames with dark, serious eyes. Tashunka spoke first. He was the eldest, a man who had seen 70 winters. Though he looked older now, his face carved deep with lines of exhaustion and grief. "The agent came again yesterday," he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, as if speaking too loud would break something. "He says we must move by the next moon. The land here belongs to the settlement now." No one spoke. The fire crackled, sending up a thin stream of smoke through the opening at the top of the lodge. "He says there is land to the west," Tashunka continued. 3 days' journey, near the river. "The river where the Omaha hunt," said Chaitan, a young man with a scar across his jaw from a hunting accident 2 summers ago. "They will not welcome us. They will not have a choice. The agent says the land is for anyone who will farm it." "Farm." Chaitan said the word like a curse, like the white men. "Like hungry people," said Takawin, one of the elder women. She sat very straight, her hands folded in her lap. "We are hungry. The children are hungry. There are no buffalo here. The deer are scarce. We cannot survive another winter in this place." "We cannot survive another winter anywhere," Chaitan muttered. Takawin looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Then we will try anyway." The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the hides that covered the lodge frame. Anika felt Makawi's shoulder press against hers, warm and solid. The baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, and Makawi shifted him to her other arm. "What does the agent want in return?" asked Ista, another woman, younger than Anika by perhaps 5 years. Her husband had died in a hunting accident last spring, leaving her with 2 sons to raise alone. "He wants us to send the children to the mission school," Tashunka said. "For learning." "For forgetting," Ista said quietly. Tashunka nodded. "Yes, for forgetting." No one spoke for a long time. The fire burned lower. Anika watched the flames dance and thought of her daughter, of Winona's small hand in hers, of the way the child still whispered prayers to the spirits her grandmother had taught her. Would they take that from her? Would they dress her in strange clothes and teach her to be ashamed of her own face? "We do not have to send them," Tarquin said finally. "The agent can say what he wishes. We can say yes and do nothing. He will come to check. Then we will say the children are ill. We will say the journey is too far. We will say many things." Tarquin's voice was hard now, like stone. "But we will not give him our children." Several people murmured agreement. Chaitan nodded. Even Tushunka seemed to sit a little straighter. "Then it is decided," the old man said. "We will go to the land by the river. We will leave in 4 days, when the moon is full enough to light the path. Bring only what you can carry. We will walk." "The horses?" someone asked. "Sold. The agent will buy them. We need the goods more than the animals." This news settled over them like a shroud. Horses meant freedom, meant distance, meant the ability to run if enemies came. But horses also needed grass, and there was little grass where they were going. Horses needed care, and there were barely enough hands to care for the children. The meeting ended. People filed out slowly, their shoulders bent against the wind that had grown fiercer while they sat inside. Anika helped Makawi to her feet, and together they walked back to their lodges, the baby sleeping now against his mother's chest. 4 days, Makawi said. 4 days, Anika repeated. It was not enough time. It would never be enough time, but it was what they had. That night, Anika lay awake beside Winona, listening to the wind test the teepee's seams. She had spent the day sorting through their belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. The pile to leave was larger. It included the cooking pot her mother had given her, too heavy to carry. The stack of hides she had been saving for winter clothing, too bulky. The bone tools her husband had made, beautiful and useless now. What remained fit into 2 bundles. Clothes, a small pot, a knife, a fire-starting kit, dried meat, and the buffalo robe they slept under. Everything else would stay here, in this place that was no longer theirs, waiting for whoever came next. Winona stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Anika pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of the child's body against her own. Winona smelled of wood smoke and the sage Anika had used to wash her hair. She was so small still, so fragile. How would she survive a 3-day walk in the cold? How would any of them? Outside, someone was coughing, the same wet, deep cough from Ihawi's lodge. It went on, tearing through the night like cloth ripping. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Anika closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep would not come. Instead, she thought of her husband, of the way he used to check the teepee's ties every night before bed, making sure they were secure. She thought of her mother, who had known every plant in these hills, every root and leaf that could heal or feed. She thought of her father, dead before she was born, killed in a raid she knew only from stories. They were all gone now. The old world was gone, and tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, they would walk away from the graves that held them, leaving the bones of their people in earth that no longer belonged to anyone. The morning they left was clear and cold, the sky a hard blue dome overhead. Frost covered everything, turning the grass silver. The lodges came down one by one, the hides folded and bundled, the poles left standing like skeletal trees. No one would take them. Poles could be cut anywhere. Anika tied Winona's bundle to her back and took the child's hand. Winona carried a small basket with her doll inside, a corn husk figure her grandmother had made. The child had refused to leave it behind, and Anika had not argued. Let her have this one small thing. They gathered at the edge of camp, 15 families, maybe 70 people in all. Many were old, many were children. The strong men who should have been among them were mostly dead or scattered, lost to fever or raids, or the lure of work in the settlements that promised coin and delivered only debt. Tushunka stood at the front, leaning on a walking stick. His wife, Wikapi, stood beside him, a bundle on her back larger than she was. She was nearly as old as he was, her face a map of years and sorrow, but she stood straight, her jaw set. She would walk the whole way or die trying. Anika knew this without asking. "We go now," Tushunka said, not loudly, but everyone heard. "We follow the river. We do not stop except to rest. If someone falls, we help them. No one is left behind." "No one is left behind," the people repeated, the words soft and ragged. They began to walk. The first day was not terrible. The path was flat, following the river through open grassland. The sun came out, weak but present, warming their backs. Children ran ahead and then circled back, their breath white in the cold air. Old Ihawi rode on a travois, pulled by Chaitan and another young man, her body wrapped in blankets, her face grey as ash. She was still alive, but barely. No one said what they all knew, that she would not survive the journey. Anika walked near the middle of the group, Winona's hand in hers. The child was quiet, her eyes taking in everything, the wide sky, the yellow grass, the river running dark and cold beside them. She did not complain. She did not ask when they would stop. She simply walked, one small foot in front of the other, her breath coming in quick, white puffs. Makawi walked beside them, the baby tied to her chest in a cradle board. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but she did not slow. Behind them, Ista's two sons chased each other through the grass, their voices high and bright. They were too young to understand what was happening, or perhaps old enough to understand and pretending otherwise. They walked until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tushunka called a halt near a stand of cottonwood trees, and people collapsed where they stood, too tired to speak. Some gathered wood for fires, others unpacked food. Children cried, babies fussed. Old Ihawi lay on her travois, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. Anika made a small fire and heated water in their pot. She had a handful of dried meat and some cornmeal, enough for a thin soup. Winona nodded and sipped, her small hands wrapped around the bowl for warmth. Across the fire, Makawi nursed her baby, her eyes distant. The infant made small, sucking sounds, content. Anika felt a pang of something, not quite envy, not quite grief, something in between. She had tried to have another child after Winona, but her body had refused. 3 times she had felt life begin inside her, and 3 times it had ended before the first moon passed. After the 3rd time, she had stopped trying. Perhaps it was the hunger. Perhaps it was the grief. Perhaps it was simply the way of things now, in this new world where so much died before it could grow. "You should sleep," Makawi said quietly, noticing Anika's gaze. "So should you." "I will, when he finishes." They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of the camp settling for the night. Somewhere, a child was crying. Somewhere else, an old woman sang a low, wordless song, more breath than voice. The fires burned down to coals, and the stars came out, cold and indifferent. Anika wrapped herself and Winona in the buffalo robe and lay down on the hard ground. The child pressed against her, already asleep. Anika closed her eyes and listened to the river, the eternal rushing that sounded like whispers, like voices of all the people who had walked beside it before, all the generations who had known its moods and seasons, who had fished its waters and told stories on its banks. She wondered if they would remember this place. She wondered if anyone would. Part 2. The Stranger's Arrival. On the 3rd day, Ihawi died. It happened in the early afternoon, while they were resting in the shade of some willow trees. One moment she was breathing, shallow and wet, and the next she was not. Wikapi, who had been sitting beside her, placed a hand on the old woman's chest and held it there for a long moment. Then she looked up at Tushunka and shook her head. They buried her there, beside the river. There was no time for a proper ceremony, no time to build a scaffold or sing all the songs. They wrapped her in a blanket and laid her in a shallow grave, covering her with stones to keep the animals away. Takawin sang a brief prayer, her voice cracking on the words. Then they walked on. No one spoke of it. What was there to say? Death was as common now as breathing. By evening they reached the place Tushunka had spoken of, a broad valley where the river widened and slowed, creating a network of marshes and small islands. In the distance, to the west, a line of bluffs rose against the sky. Cottonwoods grew thick along the banks, and there were signs of deer, tracks in the mud, droppings, the white flicker of tails disappearing into the brush. "Here," Tushunka said, and people began to unpack, to gather wood, to make camp. Anika found a spot near a large cottonwood and set down her bundles. Her back ached, her feet ached. Winona sat in the grass, too tired to move, her face pale. Anika knelt beside her and smoothed the hair from her forehead. "We're here," she said softly. "Is this home now?" Winona asked. Anika looked around at the unfamiliar valley, the strange trees, the river that ran in the wrong direction. "Yes," she said, because what else could she say? That night, fires sprang up across the valley like stars fallen to earth. People ate what little they had and then slept, too exhausted to dream. Anika lay awake for a long time, listening to the new sounds of this new place. The frogs in the marsh, the rustle of cottonwood leaves, the river's different voice. Everything was wrong. Everything was strange. But they were alive. For now, they were alive. The stranger arrived 2 days later. Anika was gathering firewood along the river when she first saw him, a figure moving through the trees on the far bank, tall and moving with the careful quiet of someone who knew how to walk without being heard. She froze, her arms full of sticks, and watched. He was a man, that much was clear, though distance and shadow made it hard to see more. He wore buckskin clothes, darker than the ones her people favored, and his hair was long and loose. He carried something across his back, a rifle, probably, or a bow. He moved along the bank for a moment, looking at something in the water, and then he looked up and saw her. They stared at each other across the river, 50 feet of cold water between them. Neither moved. Then Winona's voice called from behind, "Mother?" The spell broke. The man turned and disappeared into the trees, quick as smoke. Anika hurried back to camp, her heart beating fast. She found Tushunka sitting by his fire, mending a moccasin, and told him what she had seen. He nodded slowly, not looking up from his work. "Omaha, probably, or Ponca. These are their lands. Will they make us leave? Perhaps, or perhaps they will come to see what we are first." He tied off a stitch and bit the sinew thread. "Either way, we cannot leave. We have nowhere else to go." That night, Anika slept badly, waking at every sound. But no one came. The next day passed quietly, and the next. People began to build more permanent shelters, using branches and hides to create rough structures that would keep out the rain. Some of the men went hunting and came back with 2 deer and a handful of rabbits. It was more meat than they had seen in weeks, and spirits lifted slightly. Children played. Women sang while they worked. For a brief moment, it almost felt like the old days. Then, on the 4th morning, the stranger appeared again. This time he was closer, standing at the edge of the camp, just beyond the first line of shelters. He stood very still, his hands empty and visible, waiting. Tushunka walked out to meet him, and Anika followed without being asked, curious and wary. Chaitan came too, and Takawin. They formed a small group facing the stranger, who watched them with dark, unreadable eyes. Up close, Anika could see him better. He was perhaps 30 winters old, maybe less, his face unlined but hard, like wood that had weathered many storms. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheek, pale against his brown skin. He wore no paint, no ornaments, nothing to mark which people he belonged to. His rifle was slung across his back, untouched. "You are Dakota," he said in their language, though his accent was strange, the words shaped differently in his mouth. "We are," Tushunka replied. "And you?" "Omaha." The man paused. "My name is Chaska." "I am Tushunka." "These lands are not ours anymore," Chaska interrupted gently. The white men have made lines on paper. The lines say this land belongs to anyone who will farm it. We do not farm. Neither do I. A brief, bitter smile. But the white men do not care what we do or do not do. They care only that we stay in the places they have drawn for us. Then you will not make us leave? Chaska looked past them, at the camp, at the makeshift shelters and thin people and too many children. His expression did not change. Where would you go? No one answered. Tushunka's shoulders sagged slightly, as if a weight he had been carrying had suddenly become visible. You are welcome to stay, Chaska said. My band is 2 days north. We are few also. Perhaps we can help each other. Why? Chaitan asked suspiciously. Why would you help us? Chaska looked at him for a long moment. Because soon there will be no difference between your people and mine. We will all be the same, the ones who lost. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one spoke. The wind moved through the grass, cold and persistent. Finally, Takawin stepped forward. She was shorter than Chaska by a head, but she looked him in the eye without fear. You have scars, she said. Not just on your face. You have seen battle. I have seen many things, Chaska replied quietly. Are you a good hunter? Good enough? Can you track? Yes. Then you are welcome in our camp, Takawin said. We need hunters. We need men who can provide. If you are willing to share what you kill, we will share what we have. Chaska looked at her, then at Tushunka, then back at the camp. Anika watched his face and saw something flicker there. Loneliness, perhaps, or recognition. He was alone, she realized. Whatever band he had spoken of, he was not with them now. I will hunt for you, he said at last, but I do not stay in one place long. I come and go. That is acceptable, Tushunka said. He extended his hand, and after a moment, Chaska took it. Chaska became a ghost in the camp, there and not there, present and absent. He would appear in the early morning with meat slung over his shoulder, a deer, rabbits, once a young elk. He would leave it near Takawin's fire and disappear before anyone could thank him. He slept somewhere in the woods, never in the camp, and spoke to almost no one. The children were terrified of him. They would peek around their mother's legs when he came, wide-eyed and silent, then run when he looked at them. Only Winona seemed unafraid. She would watch him from a distance, her corn husk doll clutched in her small hands, studying him the way she studied everything, quietly, intensely, as if trying to memorize his shape. Anika found this unnerving. She kept Winona close when Chaska was near, her hand on the child's shoulder, ready to pull her away if needed. But Chaska never approached. He barely looked at them. He moved through the camp like a shadow, leaving only the evidence of his presence: meat, hoof prints in the mud, the smell of wood smoke from some unseen fire in the trees. He is strange, Makawi said one morning while they were scraping a deer hide together. My baby likes him, she said finally. Anika looked up, surprised. What? When Chaska brought the elk, he walked past my fire. The baby was crying and Chaska stopped. Just for a moment. He looked at him, and the baby stopped crying. They looked at each other, and then Chaska walked on. But the baby smiled. He never smiles. Anika did not know what to make of this. She returned to her work, but the image stayed with her. Chaska and the baby, two lost souls recognizing something in each other. That night, unable to sleep, Anika walked to the edge of camp. The moon was nearly full, painting everything silver. She stood beneath a cottonwood and looked out at the dark line of trees where Chaska made his camp, wherever that was. He will not hurt anyone. Anika spun around. Takawin stood behind her, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. How do you know? Anika asked. Because he is already hurt. People who are hurt do not hurt others. Only people who are empty do that. He could be empty. No. Takawin came to stand beside her. Empty people do not hunt for strangers. Empty people do not stop when babies cry. He is not empty. He is full of something he cannot name. That is different. What happened to him? I do not know. Perhaps one day he will tell us. Perhaps not. It does not matter. What matters is that he helps us, and we do not ask too many questions. They stood in silence for a while, watching the moonlight on the river. You lost a husband, Takawin said finally. Yes. It is hard, raising a child alone. Yes. Winona is a good child, smart, observant. She is. She needs a father. Anika turned to look at the old woman. No. Takawin smiled, just slightly. I said nothing. You said everything. I only observe. You are still young, Anika. Winona is still young. Life does not end because a husband dies. Life continues, Anika said quietly. That does not mean it begins again. Perhaps not, but sometimes we are surprised. With that, Takawin turned and walked back to her shelter, leaving Anika alone with the night and her thoughts. Part 3. The Long Journey. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the north with a fury that caught everyone unprepared. The first snow fell in the middle of the 10th moon, weeks before it should have. It fell all night and into the next day, heavy, wet flakes that clung to everything and turned the world white. Anika woke to find her shelter sagging under the weight, and she hurried to knock the snow off before it collapsed entirely. Around the camp, others were doing the same, their breath white in the freezing air, their faces grim. The snow stopped by midday, leaving behind more than a foot of white that made travel impossible. The hunting parties that were supposed to go out stayed in camp, burning precious wood to stay warm. Food supplies, already low, began to dwindle faster. People rationed carefully, giving more to the children and elders, going hungry themselves. Chaska appeared on the third day with 2 deer, both already gutted and quartered. He said nothing, just left the meat and vanished back into the white woods. The camp descended on it like wolves, every part used, nothing wasted. Bones were boiled for broth. Hides were scraped and stretched. Even the hooves were saved for glue. But it was not enough. Would never be enough. On the 5th day, Tashunka called a council. They gathered in his shelter, pressed close together for warmth, while outside the wind howled and tested every seam, every tie. We cannot stay here, Tashunka said without preamble. The winter will be long, the game is scarce, we will starve. Where can we go? Chaitan asked. The snow is too deep to travel. We wait until it melts enough to walk. Then we go west, into the bluffs. There are caves there, I am told. Shelter from the wind. And the Omaha have said there are buffalo still, in the valleys beyond. The Omaha. Chaitan said the word like a curse. We trust them now? We trust necessity, Takawin said sharply. The Omaha are not our enemies. The cold is our enemy. Hunger is our enemy. We must move or die. Those are the only choices. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the shelter. Anika felt Winona pressed against her side, the child's body small and warm, and thought of walking through deep snow with her, of finding a cave and trying to survive the winter in it. Of all the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. When? She asked. 3 days, Tashunka said, if the weather holds. It did not hold. That night, another storm came, worse than the first. The wind tore at the shelters, ripping some apart entirely. Snow piled up in drifts taller than a man. People huddled together, children crying, elders praying, everyone shivering despite the fires. In the morning, one of the shelters was empty. Ista and her 2 sons were gone. They found her body 100 feet from camp, half buried in snow. She had gone out for firewood, they guessed, or perhaps to relieve herself, and had gotten turned around in the storm. Her sons were nowhere to be found. Search parties went out but came back empty-handed, their faces frozen, their hope dead. They buried Ista beside the river, in the same way they had buried Ehawi. Quick and simple, no time for grief. The boys were presumed dead, taken by the cold, or the river, or the woods. No one spoke their names. To speak the names of the dead was to call them back, and there was nothing to call them back to. On the 8th day, the weather broke. The sun came out, weak but present, and the snow began to melt. Tushunka gave the order, "Pack everything, leave nothing, we move at first light." That night, Anika could not sleep. She lay beside Winona, listening to the child's breathing, trying to memorize the sound. Tomorrow they would walk into the unknown, and there was no guarantee they would survive. The bluffs were 2 days' journey through snow and cold. Winona was strong, but she was still a child, still small. What if she fell? What if the cold took her, the way it had taken Ista's sons? Anika closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words would not come. Her mother had taught her the prayers, long ago, but Anika had forgotten most of them. All she could remember was the feeling, the sense of being connected to something larger than herself, something that cared, something that listened. Now, she felt nothing. The world was cold and empty and indifferent. If there were spirits, they had abandoned this place long ago. A sound outside made her open her eyes, footsteps soft in the snow. She sat up carefully, not wanting to wake Winona, and peered through the gap in the shelter's wall. A figure stood near the fire pit, barely visible in the darkness. Chaska. He was adding wood to the coals, building the fire back up. His movements were slow and deliberate, and Anika realized he was doing this at every fire pit in the camp, making sure everyone woke to warmth. She watched him work, this strange, silent man who owed them nothing and yet gave everything. When he finished, he stood for a moment, looking around at the sleeping camp. Then he turned and walked toward the woods. "Wait," Anika called softly. He stopped, but did not turn. Anika slipped out of the shelter, pulling her robe around her, and walked toward him. The snow crunched under her moccasins, loud in the quiet night. "You are leaving," she said, not a question. "No." His voice was low, barely more than a whisper. "I am hunting. We will need meat for the journey." "In the dark?" "The deer move at night, less disturbed." Anika studied his face, what she could see of it in the dim firelight. The scar on his cheek looked darker, a shadow within shadows. His eyes were unreadable. "You do not have to do this," she said. "We are not your people." "No," he agreed. "But you are people. That is enough." He turned to go, and this time Anika did not stop him. She watched him disappear into the trees, a ghost among ghosts, and wondered what had happened to make him this way, so generous and so broken, so present and so absent. When she returned to the shelter, Winona was awake, sitting up with the buffalo robe around her shoulders. "Was that the hunter man?" she asked. "Yes." "Is he coming with us?" "I do not know." "I hope he does," Winona said seriously. "I think we need him." Anika pulled the child close, holding her tight. "Yes," she whispered into her daughter's hair. "I think we do." They left at dawn, when the sky was still grey and the stars had not quite faded. 70 people, give or take, moving slowly through the snow like a wounded animal, trying to find a place to hide. Tushunka led the way, his walking stick punching holes in the white crust with each step. Behind him came the strongest adults, breaking trail for those who followed. The elders rode on travois again, wrapped in every blanket the camp possessed. Children walked in the middle, held by their mothers' hands, their faces pinched with cold. Anika walked with Winona, Makawi beside them with her baby. The infant was silent, his dark eyes staring out from the cradleboard, watching the white world pass. Shaitan carried an old woman on his back when her legs gave out. Takawin walked with a child on each hip, children not her own, children who had lost their mothers to fever or cold or simply exhaustion. They stopped, once, at midday, to eat handfuls of dried meat and snow. The snow burned their mouths, but they were thirsty, and there was no time to melt it properly. Then they walked on. Winona did not complain. She held Anika's hand and walked, her breathing hard, her small legs working furiously to keep up. Anika wanted to carry her but could not. She was already carrying their bundles, and her own strength was fading. So she held the small hand tighter and prayed to gods she no longer believed in, asking them to give her daughter the strength to continue. By evening, when they finally stopped, they had traveled perhaps 5 miles. The bluffs were still a smudge on the horizon, distant and unreachable. They made camp in a hollow between 2 hills, out of the wind. Fires were lit, but there was little wood, and the flames burned low and weak. People sat close together, sharing warmth, sharing silence. No one spoke of how far they had come, or how far they had to go. What was the point? They would arrive, or they would not. Talking would not change it. Anika made a tiny fire and melted snow in their pot. She added a handful of cornmeal and stirred it into a thin gruel. Winona ate without enthusiasm, swallowing mechanically, her eyes already half closed. When she finished, she curled up against Anika and fell asleep immediately. Makawee sat across the fire, nursing her baby. The child was not feeding well, his small mouth moving but not latching. Makawee's face was tight with worry. "He is tired," Anika said softly. "We are all tired. But he will rest when we reach the caves." If we reach them, Anika had no answer to that. A sound in the darkness made them both look up. Chaska emerged from the trees, his rifle slung over his back, something large draped across his shoulders. He walked to the nearest fire and set down his burden, a young elk, already gutted, steam rising from its body in the cold air. People gathered quickly, murmuring in surprise and gratitude. Takawin took charge, directing the butchering, making sure every family got a share. The meat was barely cooked before it was devoured, people eating with their hands, grease on their faces, too hungry to care. Chaska stood apart, watching. Anika saw Takawin approach him, saw her say something, saw him shake his head in response. Perhaps he already did. Perhaps he never does. They sat in silence, listening to the sounds of people eating, people finding small comfort in full bellies, people discovering they might survive another day after all. The second day was worse. The sky was white from horizon to horizon, heavy with snow that had not yet fallen. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, burning their lungs with each inhale. The snow was deeper here, up to their thighs in places, and breaking trail became nearly impossible. By mid-morning, people were collapsing. An old man simply sat down in the snow and refused to get up. 2 women had to be dragged forward by their children. A little boy, no more than 4 winters, fell face first into a drift and did not move. His mother screamed, pulling him out, shaking him until he coughed and breathed again. Tashunka called a halt. They could go no further like this. "We rest here," he said. 1 hour, then we continue." But 1 hour passed and no one moved. People lay in the snow, too exhausted to care if they froze. Children whimpered. Elders prayed. The bluffs were still distant, still unreachable, mocking them with their solid permanence. Anika sat with her back against a boulder, Winona in her lap. The child was shivering, her lips blue, her teeth chattering. Anika rubbed her arms, her legs, trying to create warmth through friction. But it was not enough. Nothing was enough. "Mother," Winona whispered, "are we going to die?" "No," Anika said, though she had no idea if it was true. "Ista died. Her boys died. We are not them." "Why not?" "Because—" Anika's voice trailed off. "Because why? What made them different? What made them special? Nothing. They were just as vulnerable, just as mortal, just as likely to freeze in this endless white." A figure appeared through the snow, Chaska, moving with the same unhurried efficiency he always had, as if the cold and exhaustion did not touch him. He walked to Tashunka and spoke quietly. Anika could not hear the words, but she saw Tashunka nod, saw him struggle to his feet, saw him call out, "We go now. Follow Chaska. Stay close." "We cannot," someone began. "We go now," Tashunka repeated, his voice hard. "Or we die here. Those are the options." People rose slowly, reluctantly, pulling themselves upright through sheer, stubborn will. Chaska started walking, not toward the bluffs in the distance, but toward a ridge to the north, tree-covered and closer. Tashunka followed. The rest of the camp followed Tashunka. Anika lifted Winona and stumbled after them. Each step was agony. Her legs screamed, her lungs burned. Winona's weight grew heavier with every moment, until it felt like she was carrying a boulder, not a child. But she did not stop, could not stop. To stop was to die, and she would not let her daughter die. Not here, not like this. The ridge grew closer. The trees resolved into individual shapes, pine and cedar, dark against the white. Chaska led them into the forest, where the snow was shallower, protected by the canopy. The wind died. The world became quieter. They walked for another hour, Chaska leading, never looking back to see if they followed. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, and Anika wondered how. Had he been here before? Or did he simply have a gift for finding shelter, the way some people had a gift for music or healing? Finally, as the light began to fail, he stopped. They had reached an overhang of rock, not quite a cave, but deep enough to provide shelter. Trees grew close on three sides, blocking the wind. A small stream trickled nearby, not yet frozen. "Here," Chaska said. People collapsed. Some cried. Some laughed. Most simply lay in the snow, too exhausted to feel relief. Anika set Winona down gently and then fell to her knees, her body shaking. They had made it. Somehow, impossibly, they had made it. Chaska was already moving, gathering wood, building fires. Tarquin joined him, and soon others did too, finding strength they did not know they had. The fires grew, and warmth began to spread through the camp like a blessing. Anika made soup again, and this time Winona ate hungrily, color returning to her cheeks. Across the camp, people were doing the same, eating, warming themselves, beginning to believe they might survive. That night, with Winona asleep beside her, Anika walked to where Chaska sat by his own small fire, separate from the others as always. "Thank you," she said. He looked up at her, his face impassive. "For what?" "For finding this place. For the elk yesterday. For all of it." He was quiet for a long moment, then, "I did not do it for thanks." "I know, but you have it anyway." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Your daughter," he said. "She is strong." "She is. She will survive this. You both will." "How do you know?" "Because," he said quietly, "I have seen people who will not survive. You are not them." Anika wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to ask what he had seen, what had happened to him to make him this way. But something in his face stopped her. Some deep well of pain that she had no right to disturb. "Good night," she said instead. "Good night." She walked back to her fire, back to Winona, and lay down beside her daughter. Outside, the wind howled, but here, in this small shelter, they were safe. For tonight, at least, they were safe. Part 4. Pressure from outside. They stayed beneath the overhang for 3 days, recovering strength, hunting when they could, preserving what meat they caught for the journey ahead. The bluffs were still a day's walk away, but they were visible now, solid and real, no longer just a distant promise. On the 4th morning, 2 riders appeared. They came from the south, moving slowly through the snow on horseback. White men, Anika realized with a jolt of fear. Their heavy coats and wide-brimmed hats marked them as settlers or soldiers or agents. She could not tell which from this distance, and it did not matter. They were danger either way. Tashunka went to meet them, and Anika watched from beside her fire. Winona pressed close against her side. The riders dismounted, and one of them, tall, with a thick beard, spoke to Tashunka in a language Anika did not fully understand. English, probably. The language of the treaties and the broken promises. The conversation went on for several minutes. Tashunka's shoulders grew tighter with each word. "He has papers. He wants us gone." "Where are we supposed to go?" Chaitan demanded. "They did not say. They do not care. They will return in 2 days. If we are still here, they will bring more men. They will make us leave." Silence fell over the camp, heavy as the snow. People looked at each other, at their children, at the fires they had worked so hard to build. 2 days. How were they supposed to move again in 2 days? We had barely survived the last journey. "We go to the bluffs as planned," Tarquin said firmly. "The caves are there. No rancher can claim the inside of a mountain. We will be safe." "If we can reach them," someone muttered. "We will reach them." "And if we cannot?" No one answered. That night, as Anika lay awake, she heard voices outside. Tarquin and Chaska speaking in low tones. She could not make out the words, but the urgency was clear. After a while, the voices stopped, and footsteps moved away into the darkness. In the morning, Chaska was gone. People noticed immediately. "Where did he go?" Winona asked, her voice small. "I do not know," Anika said, though she had an uneasy feeling she did know. He had gone to scout the bluffs, or to find another route, or to do something, anything, to help them survive. That was who he was, a man who could not stop trying to save people, even when saving himself seemed impossible. They packed up that day, preparing for the final push to the bluffs. One more day of walking, Tashunka promised. One more day, and they would have shelter, real shelter, the kind that could withstand winter. But when they set out the next morning, Anika could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The sky was too clear, the air too still. It felt like the calm before a storm, and storms in this season were deadly. They walked through the morning without incident, the bluffs growing larger with each hour. By midday they could see details, rock faces, patches of trees clinging to steep slopes, dark openings that might be caves or might just be shadows. Then the riders returned. There were 5 of them this time, all armed, all on horseback. They blocked the path ahead, waiting. Tashunka raised his hand, and the camp stopped. "You were supposed to be gone," the bearded man called out. "We are leaving," Tashunka replied. "We are going to the bluffs. The bluffs are on the rancher's land too. You cannot go there." "Then where can we go?" The man shrugged. "Not my problem. Go back where you came from." "We came from land that was also taken. There is nowhere to go back to." "Then I guess you'll have to figure something out." The man's hand moved to his rifle. "But you're not staying here. We'll give you 1 more day. Tomorrow, if you're still on this land, we remove you by force." He turned his horse and started to ride away, but Chaitan stepped forward, his fists clenched. "We have children," he shouted. "Elders, where do you expect us to go in the middle of winter?" The bearded man stopped and looked back. His expression was not cruel, exactly, but it was indifferent, which was worse. "Not my problem," he repeated. Then he and the other riders galloped away, kicking up snow. The camp erupted in angry voices. People shouted, gesturing, arguing about what to do. Some wanted to fight, some wanted to run, some simply stood in stunned silence, too exhausted to react. Anika pulled Winona close and said nothing. What was there to say? They were trapped between impossible choices. Stay and be driven out by force, or leave and freeze in the wilderness. Either way, people would die. Tashunka raised his hands, calling for quiet. "We continue to the bluffs," he said. "We find the caves. Once we are inside, they cannot easily force us out. The passages are narrow. A few people can hold against many." "And if they bring an army?" someone asked. "Then we die," Tashunka said simply. "But we die in shelter, not in the snow. That is worth something." It was not much of a plan, but it was the only one they had. They reached the bluffs as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow. The rock face rose above them, grey and ancient and indifferent. Caves dotted the lower slopes, dark mouths in the stone. Tashunka led them to the largest opening, and they filed inside, grateful to be out of the wind. The cave was deep, stretching back into darkness, but the entrance was wide enough for multiple fires. Someone found wood, dry driftwood washed up from an ancient river probably, now buried under rock. Fires were lit, and the cave filled with smoke and warmth. Children explored the deeper passages, their voices echoing off stone. Elders settled near the fires, groaning with relief as they sat on ground that did not move or shift. Women began unpacking, organizing, making this barren stone feel more like home. Anika found a spot against the wall and spread out their buffalo robe. Winona sat cross-legged, examining a small stone she had found, turning it over and over in her hands. "Is this our home now?" she asked. "For a while," Anika said. "I liked the river better." "So did I." They sat in silence, watching the firelight dance on the cave walls, and Anika thought about the bearded man's words, "Not my problem." That was what they had become, wasn't it? A problem to be solved, an inconvenience to be removed. Not people, not families, not human beings trying to survive, just a problem. She felt anger rise in her chest, hot and bitter. But there was nowhere to direct it, no one to fight. The men with rifles would return tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, and there was nothing she could do to stop them. Footsteps echoed in the cave entrance. People looked up, tense, hands moving to knives and clubs. Then someone laughed in relief. Chaska had returned. He walked into the firelight, his rifle over his shoulder, his face unreadable as always. He carried something in his arms, bundles wrapped in hide. He set them down near Takawin's fire and then straightened. "The passages go deep," he said without preamble. "There is water inside, a spring that does not freeze, and there are other exits, hidden. If the men come, you can escape through the mountain." "How do you know this?" Tushunka asked. "I explored while you walked. The caves connect. Some go for miles." "Then we are safe." "Safer," Chaska corrected. "Not safe. The men will return, and they will not stop until you are gone." "Then we fight." Chaska shook his head. "You cannot win a fight against guns and numbers. But you can disappear. Use the passages. Move deeper into the mountain. They will not follow. The dark frightens them more than it frightens you." It was a good plan. The only plan, really. Tushunka nodded slowly, and relief rippled through the camp. Chaska unwrapped his bundles. More meat, this time rabbit and turkey, and something else, canvas sacks filled with cornmeal and dried beans. "Where did you get this?" Takawin demanded. "From a trader, 10 miles south." "How did you pay for it?" Chaska's jaw tightened. It does not matter. But Anika saw the fresh bruise on his cheek, saw the way he favored his left side when he moved, and she understood. He had not paid with coin or trade goods. He had paid with pain. "You should rest," she said quietly. He looked at her, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or surprise that someone had noticed. Then it was gone, shuttered behind his usual mask. "I am fine." "You are hurt." "I have been hurt before. That does not mean you have to be hurt again." He stared at her for a long moment, and Anika felt Winona shift beside her, felt the child's small hand slip into hers. The cave was quiet, except for the crackling of fires and the distant drip of water somewhere in the darkness. "Why do you care?" Chaska asked finally. "Because," Anika said, "someone should." Part 5. The Trial. The men returned 3 days later, as promised. Anika was gathering water from the spring when she heard the horses, many of them, more than before. She hurried back to the entrance and found people already gathering, tense and afraid. There were at least 20 riders this time, spread out across the snow. The bearded man sat at the front, his rifle across his saddle. Beside him was another man, older, wealthier looking, wearing a thick coat with fur trim, the rancher, Anika guessed. Tushunka walked out to meet them, alone. The rest of the camp stayed near the cave entrance, watching. The rancher spoke, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "You are on my land." "We are in the mountain," Tushunka replied. "The mountain belongs to no one." "The mountain is on my land, therefore it is mine." "We mean no harm. We only seek shelter for the winter." "You'll seek it somewhere else." The rancher gestured to his men. "Clear them out." The riders began to dismount, but before they could move forward, Chaska stepped out of the cave. He carried no weapon, but his presence alone made the men pause. "You know me," he said to the bearded man. The bearded man's eyes narrowed. "Chaska." "Yes. I thought you were dead." "Many people have thought that. They have been wrong." The two men stared at each other, and something passed between them. Recognition, memory, something Anika could not name. Finally, the bearded man shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Orders are orders. These people have to go. They will starve if they leave now. Then they should have left when they had the chance." Chaska took a step forward. "Let them stay until spring. They will be gone by the thaw. You have my word." "Your word?" The bearded man laughed, bitter and short. "What's that worth?" "More than you think." The rancher interrupted, impatient. "I don't care about words or promises. I want them gone today." "That is not happening," Chaska said quietly. "Then we'll make it happen." The rancher nodded to his men, and they started forward, rifles in hand. The camp tensed. Women pulled children back into the cave. Men grabbed whatever weapons they had, knives, clubs, rocks. But Chaska did not move. He stood in front of the cave entrance, alone, unarmed, immovable. "You will have to kill me first," he said. The bearded man reined in his horse. "Chaska, don't be stupid." "I am not being stupid. I am being clear. These people are under my protection. If you want them, you go through me." The standoff stretched, tense and fragile. Anika held her breath, held Winona close, and prayed to whatever might be listening that this would not end in blood. Finally, the rancher cursed and turned his horse. "This isn't over," he spat. "We'll be back with the law, and when we come, your protection won't mean anything." He rode away, his men following reluctantly. The bearded man lingered a moment longer, looking at Chaska with an expression Anika could not read. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "I have made many," Chaska replied. "What is one more?" The man shook his head and rode after the others, leaving the camp in stunned silence. Tashunka approached Chaska, his old face troubled. "They will return." "I know." "With more men." "I know." "What will we do then?" Chaska looked at him, then at the cave, then at all the people standing in the entrance, women, children, elders, all watching him with wide eyes. "We will do what we must," he said. "We will survive." That night, Anika found Chaska sitting at the back of the cave, near the spring. He was cleaning his rifle by the light of a small fire, his movements precise and practiced. She sat down beside him without asking permission. He glanced at her but said nothing. "You knew that man?" she said. "Yes." "How?" Chaska was quiet for a long time. "Before I understood what it meant." "You worked for them?" "Yes." "Against your own people?" "Against everyone who they said was an enemy. Omaha, Lakota, Ponca, it did not matter. I led them to camps. I helped them do what they did." Anika felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Why?" "Because I was young and stupid, and they offered me a horse and a rifle and said I would be important. Because I wanted to believe there was a place for me in their world." He laughed, bitter and broken. "There was not." "What happened?" "I led them to a camp, a winter camp, peaceful, mostly women and children. They promised they only wanted to talk, to make a treaty." He stopped, his jaw working. "They lied." Anika waited, barely breathing. "I watched them kill everyone," Chaska continued, his voice flat, dead. "I did nothing. I stood there with their rifle in my hands, and I watched. Afterwards they paid me, gave me coin and said I had done good work. Said they would call on me again. But you left. I ran. I could not stay. But running does not change what I did. Nothing changes it." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. "That is why you help us," Anika said finally. "Yes. Because you think it will make up for what you did." "No. It will never make up for it." You are not the same person you were then, she said quietly. How do you know? Because that person would not be here. He would not fight for us. He would not risk himself for people he does not know. Chaska closed his eyes. Sometimes I think it would be easier to be that person still. To not care. To not feel. But you do care. You do feel. That is what makes you human. Human, he repeated, as if tasting the word. I'm not sure I have the right to claim that anymore. Everyone has the right to be human, even those who have done terrible things, maybe especially them, because only humans can choose to be better. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Anika saw tears in his eyes. He blinked them away quickly, but they had been there, real and raw. Thank you, he said, his voice barely a whisper. For what? For seeing something in me I cannot see in myself. Anika squeezed his hand once, then stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow we prepare for when they return. They will bring soldiers. Anyway, outside the wind howled, but inside the cave they were warm, and for tonight that was enough. The soldiers came a week later. They arrived at dawn when the sky was grey and the air was bitter cold. 50 men on horseback, maybe more, their uniforms dark against the snow. They formed a line at the base of the bluffs and waited, their rifles ready, their faces hard. An officer rode forward. You are ordered to evacuate this area immediately. Failure to comply will result in your forcible removal. Tashunka stood at the cave entrance, his walking stick in one hand. We cannot leave. We have nowhere to go. That is not our concern. You have 1 hour. We need more time. 1 hour. The officer turned his horse and rode back to his men. The camp erupted in panic. People grabbed belongings, trying to pack, trying to think, trying to figure out where they could possibly go that would not kill them. But Chaska was calm. He gathered Tashunka, Takarwin, Chaitan, and a few others near the back of the cave. We use the passages, he said. We go deeper into the mountain. They will not follow. How do you know? Chaitan demanded. Because I know soldiers. They are brave against people who cannot fight back, but they are terrified of the dark, of the unknown. They will not enter these caves. And if you are wrong, then we fight, but I am not wrong. They gathered everyone, every person, every child, every elder. They lit torches and began moving into the deeper passages, away from the entrance, away from the light. The passages were narrow, winding, cold. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled of stone and dampness and ancient earth. Winona clung to Anika's hand, her eyes wide with fear. Where are we going? Somewhere safe. It is dark. I know, but I am here. I will not let go. They walked for what felt like hours, descending into the mountain's heart. Behind them, faint shouts echoed, the soldiers entering the cave, searching, finding no one. Chaska had been right. They did not come deep. They did not even try. Finally, the passage opened into a large chamber, lit by a strange blue glow from minerals in the walls. It was warmer here, slightly, the rock radiating some ancient heat. A pool of water sat in the center, perfectly still, reflecting the glowing stone. We stay here, Chaska said. People collapsed, exhausted and terrified. Children cried, elders prayed. Fires were lit, small and smoky, but they provided some light, some warmth. Anika sat with Winona, holding her close. The child was shivering, not from cold, but from fear. Are they gone? Winona whispered. I do not know. Will they find us? No, we are too deep. We are safe here. I want to go outside. I want to see the sky. Soon, Anika promised, though she had no idea if it was true. They stayed in the deep chamber for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Chaska and Chaitan went back to the entrance to scout. They returned hours later with news. The soldiers were gone. They had searched the caves, found nothing, and left, but they had left warnings posted. Anyone found on this land would be arrested. We cannot stay here forever, Tushunka said wearily. No, Chaska agreed. But we can stay through the winter. In the deep chambers, we are hidden. We have water, and I can hunt at night. When spring comes, we can move on. To where? No one answered. Because there was nowhere. Every place they could go was claimed, controlled, forbidden. They were ghosts in their own land, drifting between impossible choices. But they were alive. And as Takawin said, quietly, to the gathered people, being alive is a kind of victory. Small, but real. We take the victories we can. Part 6. A new place. Winter deepened. Snow piled higher outside the cave, sealing them in more thoroughly than any army could. But inside, in the deep chambers, life continued. They established routines. The women taught the children in the mornings, language, stories, skills. In the afternoons, the men maintained weapons and tools. Evenings were for communal meals, songs, prayers. Chaska came and went like a spirit, always bringing food, always disappearing before thanks could be offered. But Anika noticed he stayed a little longer each time, sitting by the communal fire for a few minutes before retreating into the darkness. One night, Winona approached him shyly, holding her cornhusk doll. "What is her name?" Chaska asked, surprising everyone by speaking first. "Grandmother," Winona said, "because she looks old. She looks wise." "Yes, she tells me stories." "What kind of stories?" "About the old days, when the buffalo were everywhere and the people had many lodges, when no one was hungry." Chaska was quiet for a moment. Then, "Those were good days." "Did you see them?" "Once, a long time ago. My mother says they will not come back." "Your mother is right." Winona considered this seriously. "Then we will make new days, different days." Chaska smiled, just slightly, just barely, but it was there. "Yes, we will." After that, Winona was unafraid of him. She would sit near him when he visited, not speaking, just being present. And Chaska, for his part, did not seem to mind. Anika watched this growing connection with mixed feelings. Part of her was glad to see Winona find comfort in another person. Part of her was afraid of losing her daughter's trust, afraid of what it might mean if Chaska disappeared one day and never returned. But Takawin, who noticed everything, pulled her aside one evening. "He is not going anywhere," the old woman said. "How do you know?" "Because he has found something here worth staying for." "What?" Takawin smiled. "Purpose, belonging, perhaps even forgiveness, though he does not know it yet. He carries too much guilt. Yes, but guilt can become devotion. Shame can become service. He is learning this. And if he leaves, then he leaves, but I do not think he will." Midwinter brought illness. A fever swept through the camp, striking children and elders first. It was not the deadly plague of years past, but it was bad enough. 3 children died, and an old man, and one of the younger women who had just given birth. Anika tended the sick with Takawin, boiling water, making poultices from the few herbs they had, sitting with the dying so they would not be alone. It was exhausting, heartbreaking work. Winona fell ill on the 10th day. Anika felt her daughter's forehead and knew immediately: fever, high and dangerous. She tried not to panic, tried to remember everything her mother had taught her about healing. She made tea from pine needles, spooned it carefully into Winona's mouth. She bathed the child in cool water. She prayed to spirits she was not sure existed anymore, but the fever did not break. On the second night, Winona's breathing became labored. Anika held her, rocking, whispering words that had no meaning, only sound, only comfort. Chaska appeared at her side, silent and sudden as always. "Let me help," he said. "There is nothing you can do." "There is." He disappeared and returned minutes later with a bundle of dried leaves. "Willow bark, for fever. My grandmother used it." He showed Anika how to prepare it, steeping it in hot water until the liquid turned dark. They gave it to Winona in small sips, and then they waited. Hours passed. Anika did not sleep. Chaska stayed beside her, not speaking, just present. His silence was more comforting than any words could have been. Just before dawn, Winona's fever broke. She opened her eyes, looked at her mother and whispered, "I am thirsty." Anika burst into tears. She pulled her daughter close, holding her so tight Winona protested weakly. But Anika did not care. Her daughter was alive. The fever had passed. "Thank you," she said to Chaska, her voice thick with emotion. He nodded. "She is strong, like her mother. I am not strong." "You are stronger than you know." He stood to leave, but Anika reached out and caught his hand. "Stay," she said. "Please." He hesitated, then sat back down, and as the sun rose somewhere outside the mountain, painting the cave walls in shades of gold, they sat together, a widow, a broken scout, and a recovering child, and felt, for the first time in a long time, something like hope. Part 7. Quiet Hope. Spring came slowly, announced first by the sound of dripping water, then by a change in the air, less bitter, slightly warmer. Chaska went out one morning and returned with news. The snow was melting. The passes were becoming clear. The camp stirred with new energy. People began talking about leaving, about finding a better place, about starting over. But the question remained, where could they go? Chaska had a proposal. There is a valley 2 days west, remote, no settlements, no ranchers. The Omaha know it but do not use it, too far from their main camps. It has water, game, shelter. "How do you know this?" Tushunka asked. "I have been there. I went last week to scout." "And you think we should go?" "I think it is your best choice, perhaps your only choice." The council debated for hours but ultimately agreed. They would move when the weather cleared, taking only what they could carry, leaving behind the deep chambers that had sheltered them through the worst of winter. Anika felt both relief and sorrow. Relief to be leaving the darkness, to see the sky again. Sorrow to abandon yet another place, to keep wandering, to never have a home that could not be taken. The night before they left, she found Chaska by the underground spring, filling water skins. "Will you come with us?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. "To the valley?" "Yes." "I had not thought about it." "Think about it now." He set down the water skin and stood, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Why do you want me to come?" "Because," Anika said, choosing her words carefully, "Winona has lost so much. Her father, her home, her old life. She needs people she can trust, people who will not leave." "I am not her father." "I know, but you could be something, a guardian, a teacher, someone who cares." Chaska was quiet for a long time. Then, "And you? What do you need?" The question caught Anika off guard. She had spent so long thinking about Winona's needs, about the camp's needs, that she had forgotten to consider her own. "I need," she said slowly, "to not do this alone. To have someone who understands. Someone who—" She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Someone who carries the same weight," Chaska finished for her. "Yes." He studied her face, and Anika felt suddenly exposed, vulnerable in a way she had not felt since her husband died. But she did not look away. "I will come," Chaska said finally, "if you will have me." "We will." He nodded once, a small gesture that felt monumental. Then he picked up the water skins and walked past her, back toward the camp. Anika stood alone for a moment, listening to the spring's eternal trickle, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not happiness, exactly, not joy, but something lighter than the grief she had carried for so long, something that might, one day, become hope. They left the caves on a clear morning, the sun bright and warm on their faces after months of darkness. The snow was mostly gone, leaving behind mud and new grass pushing up through the earth. Birds sang in the trees. The first birds Anika had heard since autumn. Winona ran ahead with the other children, laughing, her corn-husk doll clutched in one hand. She was thin but healthy, her eyes bright, her spirit unbroken. Watching her, Anika felt a fierce surge of love and pride. Chaska walked beside her, carrying their bundles without being asked. He was quieter than usual, and Anika wondered what he was thinking, what battles were being fought in the silence of his mind. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Of what?" "Of being responsible for people again, after what happened before." He did not answer immediately. They walked a few steps in silence. Then, "Yes, I am terrified." "Good." He looked at her, surprised. "Good?" "Yes, because fear means you care. It means you will try your hardest not to fail. That is all anyone can ask. What if my hardest is not enough? Then it is not enough. But you will have tried. That matters." Chaska smiled then, a real smile, small but genuine. "You are wise." "No, just tired of being afraid all the time. Sometimes you have to choose to be brave instead, even when you do not feel it." They walked on through the spring morning, part of a long line of people moving toward an uncertain future. But they were moving together, and that had to count for something. The valley Chaska had spoken of was even better than promised. It lay in a fold between two ridges, sheltered from wind, with a clear stream running through it and stands of pine and aspen on the slopes. Game signs were everywhere, deer tracks, rabbit droppings, the scratch marks of bears on tree trunks. "We will need to be careful of the bears," Takawin noted. "The bears will need to be careful of us," Chaitan replied, grinning. They made camp on the valley floor, near the stream. This time, they built more permanent structures, proper lodges using the old methods, with frames of saplings and coverings of bark and hide. It took days, but when they were finished, the camp looked almost like the old camps from before the dying times. Anika and Winona had their own small lodge, but Chaska helped them build it, showing Winona how to lash poles together, how to secure the covering so wind could not tear it away. The child watched him intently, absorbing every detail. "Why do you know so much?" she asked at one point. "Because my grandmother taught me. She said a person who cannot build their own shelter is dependent on others. Dependence is dangerous." "Were you dependent once?" Chaska glanced at Anika, who was working on the opposite side of the lodge. "Yes, I was. It did not end well." "But you learned." "Yes, I learned." "Then you are not dependent anymore?" "No." "Good." Winona returned to her work, satisfied with this answer. That night, with the lodge complete, Anika made a fire inside and cooked a proper meal, rabbit stew with wild onions and greens Takawin had found. It was the best food they had eaten in months, and even Chaska, who rarely ate with them, sat down and accepted a bowl. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the camp settling around them, children playing, adults talking, the stream running eternal just outside. "This place is good," Winona said, scraping the last of her stew from the bowl. "It is," Anika agreed. "Can we stay here? Forever?" Anika looked at Chaska, who looked back at her with an expression she could not quite read. "We can stay," she said carefully, "as long as we are allowed to. But forever is a long time, and the world changes quickly now." "I know," Winona said, "but I am tired of moving." "So am I." "So let us pretend it is forever, even if it is not. Let us pretend this is home." Anika felt tears prick her eyes but forced them back. "Yes, let us pretend." Summer arrived, bringing warmth and abundance. The hunters brought back meat regularly. The women found berry patches and root vegetables. Children swam in the stream and climbed trees and played games that had been forgotten during the winter. Slowly, the camp began to feel like a community again, not just a collection of survivors. Anika worked from dawn to dusk, tanning hides, gathering plants, cooking, mending. But it was different now. The work had purpose. She was building something, not just maintaining the bare minimum to survive. And Chaska was always there, helping without being asked, anticipating needs before they were spoken. He taught Winona to track, to read signs in the forest, to move quietly. He helped the men build fishing weirs in the stream. He sat with the elders and listened to their stories, learning the history he had been denied. One evening, after Winona had gone to sleep, Anika found him sitting by the stream, watching the water flow past. "May I sit?" she asked. "Of course." She sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead, the air warm and sweet. "You seem different," she said. "Different how?" "Less haunted, more present." Chaska was quiet for a moment. "This place helps. The work helps. Having people who matter helps." "People who matter?" He looked at her then, and even in the darkness she could see the intensity in his eyes. "You, Winona, the camp. I have not had people who mattered in a long time." "And before? You had people?" "Once, a wife, a child. They died in the attack I told you about, the one I led the soldiers to." Anika felt her breath catch. "Oh, I have never said this aloud before, never told anyone, but I think you should know. I think you deserve to know who I am, what I have done." "You did not kill them." "I might as well have. I led the killers to them. I trusted the wrong people. I believed lies, and they died because of it." Anika reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm. "That was not your fault." "It was. It was the fault of the people who lied, the fault of the people who killed. You were a tool they used. That does not make their actions your responsibility." "I should have known." "How could you have known? You were young. You wanted to believe there was a place for you." "That is not a crime. That is human." Chaska's hand tightened around hers. "I have spent so many years hating myself, so many years trying to make up for what I did, but the weight never gets lighter." "Maybe," Anika said gently, "that is because you are trying to carry it alone. Maybe you need to let someone help you carry it." "Who would do that?" "I would." He stared at her, and Anika saw tears in his eyes again, just as she had in the cave. But this time, he did not blink them away. He let them fall. Let himself be vulnerable. Let himself be seen. "Why?" he whispered. "Because," Anika said, "you have helped me carry mine. We are both carrying impossible weights. Maybe together they become bearable." "I am broken." "So am I. But broken things can still be useful. Broken things can still matter." Chaska leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. They sat like that for a long time, breathing together, being together. Two people who had lost everything, finding, perhaps, the beginning of something new. When they finally pulled apart, the sky had filled with more stars than Anika had ever seen. They sat in silence, watching the heavens. And for the first time in years, Anika felt something like peace. Part 8. What Remains. The seasons turned. Summer became autumn. Autumn became winter again. But this winter was different from the last. They had shelter, food stores, community. When snow fell, they stayed warm. When illness came, they tended each other. People still died, elders mostly, worn out by too many years of hardship. But the children thrived, growing stronger, taller, louder. Winona turned 7, then 8. She learned to sew from Takawin, to hunt from Chaska, to gather medicine plants from Anika. She was becoming a woman of knowledge, carrying pieces of the old world forward into the new. Chaska stayed, not as a visitor but as part of the community. He and Anika never formally married. There was no ceremony, no announcement, but everyone understood. He moved into their lodge. He helped raise Winona. He and Anika shared their lives in all the small ways that mattered. On a spring morning, nearly 2 years after they had arrived in the valley, Anika discovered she was pregnant. She told Chaska that night, after Winona had gone to sleep. He stared at her, stunned. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "But I thought so too, but apparently life surprises us." Chaska sat down slowly, his face going through a series of expressions: shock, fear, wonder, joy. Finally, he looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "I do not know if I can do this," he said quietly. "Be a father, after failing so completely before." "You will not fail," Anika said firmly. "That was a different time, a different person. You are not that person anymore." "How do you know?" "Because I know you. I see who you are every day, and who you are is good." He pulled her close, holding her as if she might disappear. "I am afraid." "So am I. But we will do it together. That is what makes it bearable." The baby was born in winter, a boy, small but healthy. They named him Takoda, which meant friend to everyone, because that was what they hoped he would be, a bridge between the old world and the new. Winona doted on him, carrying him around the camp, showing him to anyone who would look. Chaska was tentative at first, afraid to hold him too tightly, afraid to hold him at all. But gradually he relaxed. He learned to change the baby, to soothe him when he cried, to sing him the old songs his own father had sung to him. Watching Chaska with Takoda, Anika felt her heart expand in ways she had not thought possible. She had thought her heart was full with Winona. She had thought there was no room for more love. But love, she learned, did not work that way. It grew to fill whatever space was needed. Years passed. The camp became a permanent village. They built more lodges, established gardens, created a life that, while different from the old ways, honored them. They taught the children the language, the stories, the ceremonies. They adapted what needed to be adapted and preserved what could be preserved. Chaska and Chaitan built a council house using logs from the forest, and the elders met there regularly to make decisions for the community. Takawin, ancient now but still sharp, presided over these meetings, her voice cracking but her mind clear. "We have survived," she said at one meeting, when someone proposed abandoning certain old practices as impractical. "Not just our bodies, but our hearts, our traditions. That is what matters. That is what we pass forward." The village grew. People from other scattered bands found their way to the valley, drawn by rumors of a place where the old ways were still honored, where people could live in peace. The population swelled to nearly 200. With growth came challenges. Food supplies had to be managed more carefully. Disputes arose and had to be settled. Young people chafed at the old restrictions, wanting to integrate more with the settlements that were expanding ever closer. But they managed. They adapted. They survived. One evening, when Takoda was 5 and Winona was 13, Anika sat with Chaska outside their lodge, watching the sun set over the valley. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "This place, this life?" Chaska was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "Nothing lasts forever. The world is still changing. The settlements are still growing. One day they will reach this valley too." "Then what was the point?" "The point," Chaska said, taking her hand, "is that we gave our children a childhood. We gave them stories and language and traditions. We gave them a place to remember. When the world changes again, and it will, they will carry this place with them. It will live in their memories, in their songs, in the way they see the world. Will that be enough?" "It will have to be." Anika leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I am glad you stayed. I am glad you let me. Do you still carry the weight, the guilt?" "Every day," Chaska admitted. "But it is lighter now. You were right. Sharing it helps." "And do you think those you lost would forgive you?" "If they could?" Chaska closed his eyes. "I hope so. I will never know, but I hope so." They sat in silence as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged, cold and distant and eternal. Inside the lodge, they could hear Takoda laughing at something Winona had said. The sound was pure and bright, a small light against the darkness. "We made this," Anika said softly. "Against everything, we made a family." "Yes," Chaska agreed. "We did." Epilogue. Memory. 20 years later, Winona stood on the ridge above the valley, her own children beside her. The village was larger now, sprawling across the valley floor, but it was emptying. The government had come, just as Chaska had predicted, with papers and promises and ultimately soldiers. They were being relocated again, moved to a reservation 200 miles south. Most people had already gone. Only a few families remained, packing the last of their belongings, saying goodbye to the land that had sheltered them. Anika was too old to travel. She had died the previous winter, peacefully, in her sleep, with Chaska holding her hand. Chaska had died a month later, his body simply giving up once hers was gone. They were buried together on the ridge, overlooking the valley. Winona visited their graves now, her children quiet beside her. "Tell us again," her daughter said.
"About grandmother and grandfather. About how they met."
Winona smiled. "It was winter," she began. "The hardest winter anyone could remember. We had lost our land, lost our people, lost everything. We walked for days through snow so deep we thought we would die in it." "But you didn't die," her son said. "No, we didn't. Because grandfather found us. He was alone, carrying his own grief, but he chose to help us anyway. He brought us food. He showed us shelter. He kept us alive when we should have died. And then? And then we came here, to this valley, and we built a life. Not the life we had lost, that was gone forever, but a new life, a different life, and it was good." "Is that why you called the valley home?" her daughter asked. "Yes, because it was home. Not the place our ancestors knew, not the world our grandparents had, but home nonetheless, and that mattered." They stood in silence, looking down at the village, at the lodges being dismantled, at the gardens being abandoned, at the council house standing empty. "Will we ever come back?" her son asked. "I don't know," Winona said honestly. "Probably not. But we will carry this place with us, in our memories, in our stories, in the way we live our lives. That is what grandfather taught me. That is what grandmother showed me. We are more than the land we stand on. We are what we remember, what we choose to preserve. Even when everything changes? Especially when everything changes." They turned and walked down the ridge, toward the waiting wagons, toward an uncertain future. But as they walked, Winona began to sing, one of the old songs her grandmother had taught her, one of the songs they had sung in the caves during the darkest winter. Her children joined in, their young voices strong and clear. And on the ridge behind them, over the graves of two people who had loved impossibly and survived impossibly, the wind carried the song forward, into the valley, into the world, into whatever came next. The old world was gone, but the memory remained. And as long as the memory remained, something of that world, something essential, something true, would survive. That would have to be enough.